with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt roads, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including my written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. And you can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. Recently on Patreon, as I've been mentioning the last few episodes, we are in the thick of awards season here at Obsessive Viewer, and I'm a member of the Indiana Film Journalists Association. As such, I'm getting FYC season screeners, award season, for your consideration screeners, and I am piling them on, watching them as many as I can, and in doing so, I am releasing full-length Patreon potpourri episodes on Patreon. I'm grouping movies I watch for award season consideration in groups of 4 and releasing audio episodes of reviews of 4 movies at a time on Patreon. Those are available to members at all levels of all paid members. But the super supporters and top tier members get access to video versions of each of those individual reviews before I release them to all the, release them as a Patreon potpourri audio episode to all members. There we go. So if you like weird, like messing up of talking like that, check out Patreon. Once again, you can sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for all of that and a bunch more content. If you're listening to this the day of release, which is Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving here in the United States, if I remember to hit the button at midnight tonight, all day, November 29th, 2024, Black Friday, I'm going to have a sale on all tier level subscriptions for first-time members, 25% off your first month and 25% off everything on the shop section. So if you want to spend some money cheaply, sign up on Patreon today only, November 29th, and then it switches over to regular payments. But all throughout December, I'm going to have a discount of 10% on all of our Patreon stuff, whether it be tier subscriptions or purchases from the Patreon shop. That throughout the month of December, all you have to do is put in promo code HOLIDAY 2024 for tier subscriptions or shop 2024 for shop purchases. That'll be on the website on patreon.com/obsessiveviewer throughout the month of December. So keep that in mind if you want to support us at a discounted price. So that's all the stuff I've got for Patreon. I'm your host, by the way, Matt Hurt. I've been talking for 4 minutes. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, which includes Letterboxd at the username of Obsessive Viewer. And later in the show, I will be reviewing the new Disney animated movie Moana 2. But before that, I'll be going over some movie news, and then I'll review the new Ridley Scott film Gladiator II in this week's feature review. And ordinarily, I have a co-host or a guest on the show, but since it's a holiday week here in the US, and I'm somewhat of a masochist when it comes to releasing content these days, it's just me on tonight's show, so hope you guys are getting comfortable and can bear listening to my voice for a couple of hours. If you're listening to this, thank you, obviously. I appreciate it. And if you want to listen to more of my weird voice with other people, I neglected to mention this last week that I was a guest on Odd Trilogies, talking about one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I think I neglected to mention this last week, but I was a guest on Odd Trilogies podcast, which I love. My friend Andy Carr is one of the hosts there. You can go to oddtrilogies.com. for more of their stuff. But Andy and Logan were gracious enough to have me on the show on Odd Trilogies to talk about Akira Kurosawa, and specifically his Shakespeare trilogy, Odd Trilogy, where we reviewed and talked about Throne of Blood, The Bad Sleep Well, and Ron. It was an incredible conversation. I loved chatting with them about these films. They're incredible. Obviously, it's Kurosawa, but check that out at Odd Trilogies. I'll put a link in the show notes to the episode, but also check out Odd Trilogies. They're doing great work over there, and I was very honored to not only be a guest on the show, but be a guest on, to date, their longest episode, because that's... if you guys are listening to the Obsessive Viewer, you know the deal. Like, that's not a surprise. So yeah, check that out at oddtrilogies.com. And just running down really quickly some stuff that's playing in indie this week. Alamo Drafthouse is up and running. They have new release titles coming out. You can pre-order tickets to Y2K next week. Next week on there. I think they have Nosferatu tickets pre-sale available too. At the Can, as mentioned in last episode, November 29th to December 1st, they're having a screening of When Harry Met Sally. And at Living Room Theaters on Sunday, December 1st at 9:30 a.m., they are having a Very Wicked Drag Brunch. So check that out. Link in the show notes. So I'm going to go over a little bit of news before I get to the main review and secondary review for this episode, but I did want to kind of kick this off with a bit of a somber note, a bit of a kind of sad piece of news. But friend of the show, I don't think Brandon's ever actually been on the show, but friend of the podcasts, he's been a guest on Anthology, Brandon Cruz from Apathetic Enthusiasm, Interdimensional RSS, and submitted for your approval a Twilight Zone podcast. He posted on the Interdimensional RSS Facebook page, which is their Rick and Morty podcast, Brandon and Travis. He said that they're taking some time, a little bit of a hiatus, stepping away from the podcast a little bit, because Travis, his co-host, his daughter, was recently diagnosed with precursor B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So my thoughts and my thoughts go out to Travis and his family and everything, but I did want to bring this up here because there is a GoFundMe to help support the family and offset medical costs and everything. So I'll put a link in the show notes. If you're feeling generous this holiday season, please, I would it would be great if you donated, if you have the means and feel and feel in a giving mood. But my thoughts go out to Travis and his family, and yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes if you feel like contributing. So I have a couple of pieces of news to bring up. First, I want to talk about something that just really, really bothered me. And it's a controversial take that has taken place, and it ties into this week's reviews a little bit, but, the first piece of news I want to talk about before I get to the reviews for this week is the headline reads, Dwayne Johnson shares a controversial take on moviegoers singing during musicals like Wicked and Moana 2. So The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, he seems like a nice guy if, you're in the market to buy his bullshit, but, which is like his movies. Buy into his movies. I will talk about this with my Moana review later in this episode, but he seems like the least charismatic person, like in terms of just his acting. I'm going really deep into just not being a fan of the guy. His off-screen behavior is really obnoxious and annoying, but like, I don't know. I don't think he's cut out for acting, like in general, but, so he's quoted as saying that, I'll read from this Screen Rant article, in an interview with the BBC at the UK's Moana 2 premiere, the former wrestler opined that audiences are entitled to sing as much as they like if they've paid for a ticket. So his direct quote is, especially if you love music, that's the fun part. Sing! You've paid your hard-earned money for a ticket, and you've gone into a musical, and you're into it. Sing! I'm going to use some colorful language here, but fuck off. Fuck right the hell off. Honestly, like, I don't know if he, like, is quoted as saying that as, like, deliberately trying to get a rise out of people, trying to get, I don't know. I don't know. But that is so much in contrast to what I believe and hold dear in my heart. The cognitive dissonance of that, like, just to say, like, you know, you paid your hard-earned money, sing along to the movie that's on screen when you're in a crowd of people that are trying to watch the fucking movie. Like, don't do that. Don't be that person. Don't be the a-hole in the theater singing along to a movie that you are not that is on screen. That is, if it's not a sing-along specific screening, don't make noise in a movie theater. And I say that, like, I don't understand how this concept does not compute with so many people. Like, in general, just don't disrupt the experience for other people. Other people are around you in the theater. Be conscious of other people's experience, for the love of God. I've been podcasting for 12 years now, just about 11 and a half years. And I have been, like, staunchly defending this position. I feel like for the last 11 and a half years, every single chance that I've had to make this point that you should not disrupt the movie theater experience for other people, it's frustrating because it feels like that has fallen on deaf ears. That has been something that I don't know if I'm using my platform as a podcaster to share this position for 11 and a half years. And then the fucking Rock comes out and says, you know, you should sing along to Wicked and disrupt the theater experience for everyone around you. Like, again, fuck off. Like, I can't co-sign that. I can't get behind that, because it is dick behavior. It is, you are being in a disrespectful, rude person if you are disrupting the theater experience for someone else. It is, to me, it is such a strong feeling. Like, you know how people say, like, oh, I can tell everything about someone's character if they don't put the cart away in the cart corral at the grocery store, or I can tell what kind of person you are if you by how you handle or how you interact with people that are serving you, like service members, but also like wait staff at a restaurant. I can tell the content of your character by those actions and those behaviors. I'm the same way with people who talk in a movie theater. People who have full-length conversations, full-volume conversations. People who sing along to fucking Wicked in the theater when it's not a sing-along thing because The Rock told them that they can. You're not a good person. Like, I can't like sugarcoat it anymore. Like, I can't rationalize that. Don't disrupt the movie theater experience for other people. So, Dwayne Johnson, if you're listening to this, recant your statement, and I will recant my colorful language about you. So, yeah, we can bury the hatchet. We can do that, but recant your statement, please. You have 24 hours. So, I don't know why I'm threatening him, but anyway, moving on. So, another piece of news is, Earl Holliman passed away. And Earl Holliman is someone who, he had a very, very long, illustrious career. He was in numerous, things, including Forbidden Planet. But the thing that I know him best from is, of course, the very first episode of The Twilight Zone. Where is everybody? He was the only actor really for the majority of that screen time. He played a wanderer who wanders into a desert town, to a deserted town, and can't find anyone. So where is everybody? So I know him best from that, but he was in films like Giant, Forbidden Planet, and a bunch of stuff. Gunfight of the OK Corral, The Bridges of Tokyo-ri, Don't Go Near the Water, The Sons of Katie Elder, and Sharky's Machine. A bunch of stuff, like a lot of those I've never heard of. But I will say his performance in the premiere episode of The Twilight Zone was fantastic. He had to carry that episode on his back, and he played it incredibly well. And he passed away a few days ago at the age of 96. So he lived a long, fruitful life. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that and just say that, rest in peace to Earl Holliman. He not only was in Forbidden Planet, but was in the premiere episode of The Twilight Zone. So he's big in like the science fiction community. So it like, as much as I don't get like upset or weepy with celebrity deaths or anything like that, there are some that will happen that it will destroy my entire world, that are going to happen at some point. But I don't really get choked up or anything, but it did give me a little bit of pause when I saw like Earl Holliman died. Like, and I knew he was still alive. I knew that he was in his 90s, and like, so it's not something that I was surprised to see, but it was just like, you know, it's a piece. He is a significant piece of Twilight Zone history. And it's something that obviously I love the Twilight Zone, so very much. And anytime a connection to the Twilight Zone is gone from this earth, it gives me a little bit of pause. It's sad to think about. So while I celebrate Earl Holliman's life, career, and everything, and I recognize that he had a long and very long career and life that was, I'm sure, full of love and ups and downs, as all of our lives are and everything. His connection to the Twilight Zone is kind of something that I hold dear. So rest in peace to Earl Holliman. And so to kind of get us out of this somber news before the reviews thing, I do have one more piece of news that is something. So Anne Hathaway was cast in the upcoming adaptation of Colleen Hoover's Verity for Amazon MGM Studios from director Michael Showalter. So I'll read a little bit of the article. It says, quote, following the success of the Amazon film The Idea of You, which I reviewed on the podcast this year, Anne Hathaway and director Michael Showalter have found their next big project to team up on. Hathaway is set to star in Amazon MGM Studios' upcoming feature Verity, which Showalter is helming, based on the #1 New York Times bestseller by Colleen Hoover. The current script is written by Nick Antosca. Prior drafts were penned by Hilary Zeitz, Angela Lamanna, and Will Honley, and April McGuire. That's not relevant to what I'm doing here. But anyway, sources say the film will be released in theaters. So Verity, another plug for Patreon, not my Patreon, but if you go to Kim C's Patreon, The Danse Macabre with Kim C from the Year of Underrated Stephen King, if you go to her Patreon, sign up and listen to my appearance on that Patreon talking about You Like It Darker, we go on a little bit of a tangent about Colleen Hoover's writing style, her career, and that led to us reviewing It Ends With Us on this show a few weeks ago. So I'm saying this because I will have Kim C on the Obsessive Viewer to review Verity when it comes out. I haven't talked to her about it, but she will be on if she's willing to come on, if she's available. I'm going to do everything I can to make this happen, because I think it'll be fun to review that movie with her. And I kind of feel like we're contracted to, because we reviewed It Ends With Us. But in that Patreon episode on her Patreon, when we go on to the tangent about Colleen Hoover, she talks in detail about, Kim C talked in detail about Verity, and because there was an offhanded comment that she had made at one point when we were talking, I think before recording an episode, when we recorded together at some point in history, where she talked about Verity and how she read it, and it made her throw the book across the room because it was so dumb and so terrible. And then when I was on her Patreon, I asked her for follow-up things about that because I was curious. And it sounds dumb, horrible, terrible, and everything. So I say all of this to say, I'm curious to see what Michael Showalter does. I like Michael Showalter as a director, but I don't like him doing Colleen Hoover. A Colleen Hoover adaptation feels like a very, very big uphill battle, and I haven't really liked a lot of his directorial efforts of late. Like The Idea of You, I think I gave a pretty unfavorable review. Yeah, but I mean, he has it in him to do great work. I'm going to talk later in this episode about one of his frequent collaborators. And actually, I think a movie that he co-wrote in Potpourri. So, yeah, The Idea of You, I wasn't a fan of. But of course, one of my favorite movies of the last, however long years was... Okay, I'm looking at his writing credits. I need to go to his director credits. Jesus. Did I pass it already? There we go. Why is it all the way at the bottom? Anyway, okay, I never saw, spoiler alert. I heard kind of mixed to negative things about it, but, I didn't really like The Eyes of Tammy Faye either, or The Lovebirds, man. But of course, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 24, one of my favorite movies of the last 7 years, 8 years was The Big Sick, which he directed. I adore that movie. And he also directed Hello, My Name is Doris, which I really enjoyed as well before that. So he has it in him to do a really great work that can stand out. But with the source material, with what I know of the source material for Verity, I don't know if the building blocks are there for him to pull out a good story from this. So I will have more to say when Verity comes out, and hopefully Kim C will join me in the future whenever that comes out. I presume it would be probably 2026, unless they start production right. Well, if they cast Anne Hathaway, it probably might be in production early. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how anything works. So at some point, Verity will come out, and I will hopefully have Kim C on the show to review it with me. So that will do it for the news before the reviews. Let's get into the feature review of this week's episode of the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Here we go. Okay, and for this week's featured review, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on Gladiator II in a non-spoiler and spoiler review. Of course, if you want to skip around to the spoiler section or avoid the spoiler section, check the show notes for timestamps for navigating around that. Those timestamps can be found in your show notes on your podcast app that you're listening to this on now, or at obsessiveviewer.com/OV454, which is where all the show notes are on the website. So, like I said, I'm going to do a non-spoiler review and then a spoiler review for Gladiator 2. Of course, Gladiator 2 is the sequel to 2000's Gladiator from Ridley Scott. It is currently in theaters. It was released in theaters November 22nd, 2024. And the premise, according to IMDb, is after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. Director for this movie was Ridley Scott, and the writer was David Scarpa, with story by credit by David Scarpa and Peter Craig. And the cast includes Paul Mescal as Lucius, Denzel Washington as Macrinus. I almost said Macarena. Pedro Pascal as General Acacius. Connie Nielsen as Lucilla. And Joseph Quinn as Emperor Gaeta. And Fred Hetchinger as Emperor Caracalla. So let me talk really briefly about my position with Gladiator 1, the original Gladiator movie. Of course, like I said, it came out in 2000. And I remember seeing it several times when I was in high school. So I revisited it before seeing Gladiator 2. And I realized this was the first time I'd seen Gladiator since probably high school, since before like my record keeping of watching movies existed. So this is one of those like pre 2007 movies that I watched, and I watched it a fair amount of times. I remember watching it at least 3 or 4 times over the course of my life, and I really liked it at the time, and just hadn't revisited it since, until I had an excuse to with the sequel coming out. So, with that said, when I revisited it a couple of weeks ago, I was blown away by how good it is. Like it is a crowd pleaser. There's a reason why it won Best Picture. It's a big crowd pleaser, epic vengeance story, and Russell Crowe is incredible in it. He is magnetic. He is fierce. He's incredible. He is absolutely incredible in Gladiator. And there is something to that magnetism there's something about that magnetism that is absolutely missing from Gladiator II. Paul Mescal is a great actor. I appreciate him. I really like him as an actor. After Sun is an incredible movie. I still stand by that. But there is just like a lot of stuff packed into Gladiator 2 that just doesn't work, and it is a problem of overstuffing the plot and including way too many subplots. So with that, all that being said, let me get into my actual like overall thoughts on Gladiator 2. By the way, I rated the original Gladiator like 4 or 4.5 stars. And like when I rewatched it, I was just like, I don't understand why I don't revisit this movie annually. Like it's that good. So I was in a kind of maybe precarious circumstance to watch Gladiator 2 because it is obviously going to be it's going to be a departure from the first movie because it's 20 some years later. And I know that it's like with legacy sequels like that, it's always a mixed bag. It's always like there's always the risk that it's going to be just god awful. And Gladiator 2 isn't god awful. Like it's actually pretty solid. I think I rated it 3.5 stars. Like I'm actually I feel like I'm kind of in the minority about it because a lot of my friends really just kind of dogged it and really hated it. I was appreciative of it in terms of the scale and the way that it kind of the way that it expands the mythology, I guess, of the original movie in some interesting ways. But the problem is it's just too overstuffed. So with the first Gladiator, you have Maximus. He is a general for the Roman army. He's betrayed, and his family dies, and he's on this vengeance quest as he kind of gets into the gladiator ring and into he aims to not necessarily take down Rome, but he aims to restore Rome to Marcus Aurelius's vision of Rome. That is the plot of Gladiator 1, and he goes up against I can't remember Joaquin Phoenix's character's name, but he goes up against his character, who is like the emperor. He's Marcus Aurelius's son, and that it's an incredible movie. It's an incredible movie. Here we have Lucius, played by Paul Mescal, who is the son of Connie Nielsen's character from the first movie, it's said in the trailer that he is Maximus's son. And so we have this whole legacy aspect of it where he is someone who is, he's the rightful heir to the throne of Rome. And he finds himself in a situation where he is also basically brought into the gladiator stuff, after his village or what have you is pillaged by Rome and taken by Rome by General Cassius, played by Pedro Pascal. So that is like one part of the plot. Like that's one part of the plot, because you've also got Denzel Washington's character kind of doing like some underhanded things and like being like in the ear of the emperors. You have two emperors who are, it's told to us that they are just absolutely maniacal, like evil presences and vengeful people. We see that, but we're also told it very directly. We don't have any other like background for who they are, what they are, or what their deal is. All we have is just the title card at the beginning of the movie saying like they're tyrannical emperors. Like it's kind of silly because the beginning of the movie is like title cards, and then it's just like now it comes across as like now Rome is ruled by 2 emperors. Like you thought one emperor was bad, now there are 2. It's really hokey and really dumb, and the movie doesn't do anything to really demonstrate why they're that way, who they are, because like when you look at Gladiator, the first movie, Joaquin Phoenix's character, like he's betrayed. He feels he's betrayed by Marcus Aurelius. He kills Marcus Aurelius in order to gain the throne himself. And like, so there's a lot of like pathos to that. Commodus is his name. There's a lot of like pathos to that. There's a lot of intrigue to that character. Here you just have these two like very animated twin emperors who just relish in violence and destruction, and you don't really get the sense that they're very powerful per se, but in that case they're also very malleable to influence and to not motivation but manipulation. That's the word I was looking for. So there's a lot, there's a decent amount there. There's a decent amount of character stuff there, but we don't have any other context for who they are, why they are, or what they are, except for what's told to us at the beginning of the movie. And that really goes a long way to make me lose interest in the movie right from the outset. So that's kind of annoying, really, is the main thing, is that's an annoying factor of it. Then you throw in Lucilla, played by Connie Nielsen, who is like the only character to reprise their role from the first movie, which also I like throughout the movie, I kept thinking, so Paul Mescal plays Lucius, who was played by Spencer Treat Clark in the first movie. He is Lucilla's son, and I just imagine Spencer Treat Clark. I imagine him like in 2019 being like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to reprise my role from Unbreakable in Glass. Like, okay, now that we're going to have the Spencer Treat Clark essence. And then he hears about Ridley Scott working on Gladiator II, and then being like, oh, okay, nice, I can reprise my role there. And then be like, fucking Paul Mescal. Which I will say, Paul Mescal's casting is pretty decent. He does a good job. He does a better job than I think some people give him credit for. Like I have friends like my colleague Nick Rogers. He had the very astute observation that I can't argue against. But he said that every scene with Lucius just looks like he just like ripped off, like took a hit off of a cherry flavored vape or something. Like he doesn't look like he belongs in that time era. Which I agree to an extent, but it didn't really bother me all that much because I think he does play the emotional aspect of it pretty well, and he's a talented actor. But I don't think he's necessarily miscast or anything. I think that the material just wasn't there for him, and because of that, I think the movie suffers greatly. And I think that also gives a little bit, it doesn't give enough leeway for him to really give a good, strong performance. So I don't think it's necessarily an issue with Paul Mescal not really being present in the role. I think that the material just isn't there for him. And in that case, like the whole impetus of him going into gladiator stuff, being kind of sold into gladiator slavery, basically. That whole, like, the inciting incident is a battle in his village that his wife dies in. And we meet his wife literally like 2 minutes before this scene, and it's like the laziest thing. It is incredibly lazy. Like, I saw an article about, I think it was Ridley Scott's editor saying that like kind of, or maybe cinematographer, I'm not sure, but going into like a rant about how like, oh, Ridley Scott has gotten lazy. He's just gotten lazy and his work is suffering for it. He's not as detail oriented as it used to be. And I can absolutely see that in Gladiator II. I can even see that in Napoleon. Even though I haven't seen the Napoleon director's cut. And I would assume that there would be a Gladiator II director's cut that could possibly be better. I actually watched the extended version of the original movie. And like, having seen that movie several times, I could pick up on some of the things that were new to the extended edition, because that was the first time I'd seen the extended edition. And it was like, there's a lot of stuff with Commodus that is expanding on his character. But if there is to be a director's cut of Gladiator 2, it would have to be like a significant director's cut to include any kind of characterization. Because like I said, we have all these different facets of the plot. Like Gladiator 1 is a very straightforward plot. Gladiator 2 has Lucius contending with his fight for vengeance, him going after Pedro Pascal's character, Connie Nielsen and Pedro Pascal kind of working together against the emperors. You have two emperors. You have then you have Denzel Washington kind of working against the emperors as well. It's a messy movie. And on top of that, you get a lot of theatricality with the gladiator stuff in the Colosseum, which is honestly probably the best part of the movie for me. It's very, very, very over the top. Like, the first Colosseum fight that we get is Lucius going up against Lucius and other gladiators going up against these weird, like giant, like monkeys that look like they are, like a friend of mine, I can't remember who it was, but they said that it looked like a mix between monkeys and xenomorphs. And it looks like they look like mutated monkeys, and it looks so out of place and so weird, like to the point where I was like thinking, like, are those monkeys? Like, are they supposed to be monkeys, or are they like hyenas or something? And am I just an idiot who doesn't know my zoology or anything? But yeah, they were monkeys, and it's weird. It's just weird because they're vicious and weirdly like rendered. But there's a lot of big, large scale things that happen in the Colosseum, to the point where it does seem a little bit much. It does seem a little bit much. Like, when you have giant ships in the Colosseum with water and sharks in the water, like, that is 100% over the top, jumping the shark aspects of it. And I didn't mind it though. Like, I didn't mind, as over the top and silly and weird as it was, when you have that against the backdrop of a messy plot with very, very like over the top emperors who aren't as realized, as fully realized as like Commodus was in the first movie, or anyone in any movie really, because they're basically like punchlines to a joke that hasn't been said. It's just that it's so bizarre and out of place. And when you have like the combination of that with these huge scale things happening in the Colosseum, there's a point where you just kind of like, your brain just kind of clicks off. It's like, okay, this is not going to be the not important, but the more serious vengeance story of Gladiator 1. This is something else entirely. And if you can lean into the jokes, if you can lean into the over the top nature of it, you might have a better time with this movie than most seem to have had, at least in the critic circles that I run in. And I say that as someone who rated it 3.5 stars. Like, it's a positive review. Overall, I think it's a fine movie. It's definitely got a lot of issues with it, but it's I mean, it's a large scale Ridley Scott swords and sandals movie. Like, you can't really go into it expecting Gladiator, even though it's Gladiator 2. I don't know if that's completely contradictory, but let me get back into the actual meat of the review though. When you have so we have the large scale action, there's a lot of complaints. There have been a lot of complaints that I've heard about people saying that, well, it's wildly like historically inaccurate. And yeah, it is 100% historically inaccurate. Like, it's not really a historical fiction movie. Like, it's not like Napoleon. It's not like a biopic. It's not like a big like realistically historical drama. Instead, it's using this platform, it's using this this time period of history as a jumping off point for some political allegory, some messaging in there as well. But it's mostly to entertain people. Like, it's an entertaining movie. And I was entertained by it. I was entertained. I'm not going to make the joke. But it was solid. It was solid. The violence in the actual fighting of it, I thought was really sharp and really good. There's some very kind of gratuitous violence or gratuitous dismemberments there that I thought were really good. There's some interesting turns of the plot that I'll talk about in spoilers, but in a broad sense, I will say that I was mostly on board with a lot of what was going on. Once it reaches kind of the climax of the movie, it feels like it's borrowing heavily from some of the elements of the first Gladiator movie and then repackaging it for the sequel in a way that doesn't necessarily work all the time, but it does work fairly well if you're kind of keyed into the movie the way that I was for the most part. There was something else. The historical inaccuracies. I've seen like there's a scene where someone is reading a newspaper and like the printing press didn't exist. This was, I don't know the time frame, but it was very much like this piece of paper with printed word on it would not exist at that point in history. And like, fine, it's whatever. I will say, like, I don't care if it's historically inaccurate, because it's the same principle as, like, you know, they're not speaking with like accents. They're not speaking Latin. They're not like, they're just speaking their natural voices basically. So like it's not a distraction for me. But there was an article in, I think it was Vulture maybe, or maybe I don't think it was Verity, but it was like Vulture maybe. But that was basically the premise of the article, was like, there's one line in Gladiator II that kind of just took me out of it, and I can't get it out of my head. It's one innocuous line that I cannot get out of my head. So this isn't really a spoiler, but there is a flashback to Lucius as a child on the run from Roman generals, the Roman army. And as he's escaping from one village and going into exile, basically, you see Roman guards or Roman soldiers descending upon the village. And as Lucius is running away, you hear off screen, one of the Roman soldiers saying, "Have you seen this boy?" And like, the article said, like, what was he motioning to? Do they have like a sculpted bust of Lucius at the ready to show people? And my thought is it's probably like a little sketch or something. Like, it's probably a painted image on a sheaf of paper or something. But I just thought that was pretty funny. Like, just the whole, like, have you seen this boy? It's like, you're in ancient Rome, dude. Like, you're not gonna hold up a Polaroid or anything. Like, you're not showing them an Instagram feed or something. So like, that piece of dialogue is kind of funny, but it's like that kind of thing, that kind of inaccuracy is throughout the entire movie. And it's like, it's not a movie that you need to really take seriously as, in the sense of like, okay, this needs to be a serious historical drama. It's like, it's Gladiator II. It's 24 years after the first Gladiator movie. Ridley Scott he's going to be having fun in this movie. So outside of the Colosseum and the Gladiator kind of action sequences, there are a couple of like big, like large scale, like action sequences. Again, it follows the blueprint of Gladiator 1 in certain respects pretty closely, in that like it begins with a big battle scene, and that big battle scene is pretty thrilling. It's pretty solid. And it leads to this difference of positioning, or it's a different it's like an adversarial relationship between Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, their characters in the movie. And that's one thing where, like, as much as I think that a director's cut would have to do a lot of heavy lifting to make the Emperor's storyline more compelling. I think that a director's cut that explores the conflict between Lucius and Acacius, I think that there's stuff in there that could be expanded upon, that should be expanded upon, that I think would go really well if that is part of the director's cut. But as it is in the theatrical cut, in this version of the movie, there's a lot left on the table. Like, there's a lot that could have been explored. Like, if we didn't have so many different plot threads running at the same time with like the Emperors and Denzel Washington and Connie Nielsen's character, to an extent, I really feel like the conflict between Acacius and Lucius should have been more focused. And if it was more focused and they got rid of some of the baggage of the other subplots of the movie, I think this could have been an incredible movie. But unfortunately, it's just not there, because there are so many different conflicting principles and conflicting positions once you get into the motivations of these characters and the actual, like, how they actually feel and what they believe as the movie progresses. There's a lot of ways that conflict changes gears, and the movie does deal with that here and there, but it's not touched on enough. It's not as much of a focal point. Like, this is like the Maximus and Commodus conflict in Gladiator 1. It's that level of like conflict of positioning and adversarial ship, but it's condensed to a bit part of a bigger story with a lot of moving pieces that don't work together as well. So because of that, it gets clogged up. It gets like, when we get to a point where their conflict is reaching like its apex, it doesn't have that level of satisfaction or catharsis or like thrilling, like thrills. It doesn't hit home as hard as it should, and it really should, because there's connections with Acacius and Lucilla, Connie Nielsen's character, that also help expand the complications of Lucius's positioning against Acacius. Like, there's a lot there. This movie on paper should have been a lot better with those two at odds with each other, but it crumbles. Like, it just doesn't go anywhere satisfactorily to it. Satisfactorily? I don't know. But anyway, I'll talk more about that in spoilers, but it was that was probably the most disappointing part of the movie for me. And that's the most disappointing part of this movie for me. And I also just described like giant monkey xenomorphs type hybrid, like mutated monkeys that are in this movie about ancient Rome. So that should tell you something. So as far as the resolution of it, like overall, I'll just kind of wrap up my non-spoiler review here and just say that overall, this movie, like, I may have kind of talked myself down to three stars as opposed to 3.5, because there are a lot of issues to this movie. There are a lot of missed opportunities with this movie, which is probably the biggest issue that I have with it. It is a major missed opportunity. Like, I understand the desire to do a legacy sequel. I understand wanting to revisit this, especially when you have such a strong bedrock of history with like the fall of ancient Rome. Like, this is supposed to be the impending like destruction of ancient Rome. And there's a lot that can be mined there in terms of bringing that history to the screen in a historical fiction movie like this. And they touch on that, but it doesn't go anywhere too satisfying. And that's a bummer all told. But I will say that the kind of gregarious, like grandeur, like large scale stuff worked more for me than it didn't, I think. And as silly and crazy as it is, it had like a limited effect on me. So I can't discount the movie entirely, because there is some really good action. There's some really fun energy. And as far as like Paul Mescal's character, or Paul Mescal's performance, like I said, yeah, he does, like, Nick has a point. My colleague Nick has a point about him looking out of place, but he has this, like, it's I think that it's fine for him to be cast as Lucius in this movie because he's doing something different. He's not trying to emulate Russell Crowe as Maximus, because Russell Crowe was like this tormented, like, warrior guy, and Paul Mescal is just like, he's this kind of guy who kind of seems like he's on the edge of like a sarcastic joke every scene. It's like, I don't know, that charisma kind of comes through, even if it doesn't necessarily match what's going on screen. I think he gives a charismatic presence in a way that's a little bit different than not Ridley Scott, but Russell Crowe in Gladiator 1. And I appreciate that because, like I said, a lot of elements of this movie seem to be following the blueprint of the first Gladiator. So to have it deviate from that by having a less tormented and more charismatic lead character works a little bit better for me than it probably should. But unfortunately, it also has a negative effect in that it also makes the drama, like the actual like seeking vengeance that he has, fall very, very like below the radar. Like it falls completely because we don't understand his relationship with his wife. Like we're just told like, hey, this is his wife. Oh, hey, this thing happens to her. Oh, now he's going to go on a quest for vengeance. That we don't see anything. Like even in Gladiator 1, I don't think we ever really see Maximus with his wife and son, but because of like what we're told about him, what we see from him, like he just wants to go home after the battle. Because of that, he is, because of that, he's like, we root for him. We root for him because he carries that pain and he carries that vengeance throughout the entire movie. Lucius doesn't carry much vengeance because it's contending with so many different plot lines and so many different characters, and it just doesn't, it falls very flat. So I appreciate Paul Mescal as an actor, but I don't know. The material just wasn't there for him. And I haven't really talked much about Denzel Washington, and then I'll go into spoilers, but Denzel Washington is kind of the MVP of this movie. He gives a very big performance and a very kind of like mercurial performance as well. And the way that this character kind of navigates through his position within the Roman Empire and the way he's playing like puppet master to many different pieces of it is a lot of fun. Like Denzel Washington is having a blast in this movie. He is like a ray of sunshine in this movie. And it's really pretty fantastic. So I will say that he is the MVP of the movie. And I like where his character leads, even if it kind of leads to a point where it's a little bit undercooked toward the end. So that's all I'll say in non-spoilers. But let me go into spoilers for Gladiator 2. Of course, I am going to so I'm going to go into spoilers. So I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. Once I come back, I'm going to be spoiling Gladiator 2. So if you want to navigate around spoilers, check the show notes for timestamps. And then I'll be back after this clip from the trailer, and I'll be spoiling Gladiator 2.
I remember that day. I never forgot it. That a slave could take revenge against an emperor.
Where were you born?
I don't know. I never knew a mother nor a father.
You will be my instrument.
Who are you?
Did you hear that crowd? The greatest temple Rome ever built. The Colosseum. Because this is what they believe in. Power.
All right, spoilers on for Gladiator 2, and I don't know how much more I can go into depth in spoilers, but But yeah, so spoilers on for Gladiator 2. Again, it's in theaters now. So Paul Mescal's character, not Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal. Jesus. General Acacius. Let me talk about the relationship between Acacius and Lucius, in that is where, like, let me expand upon what I said in non-spoilers, in that it's a big piece of conflict. Like, this is the emotional core of the movie. You have Acacius, who is now married to Lucilla, who is having doubts about his role as a prophetic general in the Roman Empire. And you've got Connie Nielsen's character, who is very much, it kind of seems imprisoned in the Roman Empire and wants to see its downfall as well. So you have them kind of co-conspirators to bring down the emperors. And then you have Lucius, who just lost his wife and is on a quest for vengeance to take down the Roman Empire as well. But also, he is going after Pedro Pascal. He sees Pedro Pascal's character as the person who is responsible for his wife's death. That is communicated just very, very poorly in the movie, because again, we only see, we only know like Lucius and his wife as like this opening scene of him saying like, wherever you are, you're my wife, wherever you are, I am. Like, and we get these, like, I will say, admittedly interesting, like monochromatic, visions of Lucius in the afterlife, seeing his wife being taken into the afterlife by the Grim Reaper, I guess, or like death itself. It kind of reminds me of what I understand of the Seventh Seal, which I've never seen the Seventh Seal, so I just know from like pictures, and images and clips that I've seen. But it seems very kind of similar to that in terms of like that black and white, with death holding a scythe. I don't know, but it's something that I feel is so underserved in the movie because it's supposed to be the emotional crux of the movie. So when you get to the point where like an hour and a half, or when you have like 45 minutes left in the movie, when you have Lucius and Acacius fighting in the Colosseum, that should be a huge moment. That should be a huge turning point in the movie. And it's presented as a huge turning point, but it doesn't work as a huge turning point because you don't get the sense that they are wrestling with the gravity of their conflict the way that they should be. Because at that point, we have Lucius is on a quest for blood to avenge his wife's death. And then you've got Acacius, who is working against the emperors, who is basically conscripted by his wife, Lucilla. God damn it. Anyway, Connie Nielsen's character, who is asking him, like, you need to protect Lucius. So you need to protect him. And, like, there are so many different levels and different areas of that conflict that is so rich and interesting. And then you throw them into the Colosseum, and it's like, they barely speak. Like, Acacius is just like, well, like, they try to communicate a little bit, but it should be the big, like, a big grandeur of an emotional beat of the movie. That should be a dramatic turning point in every sense of the word. And it's presented as that, but it's not served well enough. It's not as developed. It's not as written as well as it should be, because it's contending with so many different things. It's going, like, it's also 45 minutes before the end of the movie. So, you know, it's not like the climax of the movie, but like, it should be presented with a lot more emotional heavy lifting, but it's not. It's just like this, like, okay, now they're in the Colosseum, now they're fighting, and then now the crowd is turning against them, and like the Roman army assassinate Acacius, and like that as a turning point is really solid, but I wish that it had been built toward a lot better, because there's a lot of different layers to that conflict and to Acacius as a character, and I feel like that's squandered because it's presented in a very lazy and not very well drawn manner, and it didn't have that big, like, emotional heft to it that it really should have. And of course that kind of has to contend, or like it's contending with bigger subplots and everything, including Macrinus, Denzel Washington's character, basically trying to institute the fall of Rome, essentially. He is speaking in the ears of the emperors, and he is basically sowing discord among the two of them. And like, that's some really fun, interesting manipulation tactics and everything. Like that's really fun. That's really energetic. That's really a good turn of the plot. But when you have that as a big piece of the movie, and you also have like underserved character development for Paul Mescal, Connie Nielsen, and Pedro Pascal, it kind of like when you have the turn where Denzel Washington kind of influences Caracalla into killing Gaeta, like it just kind of seems like, okay, that's cool. It's sudden, it's crazy, but I mean, this is also like it didn't feel like it's ushering in the third act the way that it should be. Like it is, but it's also like, maybe this is something that could have happened a little bit earlier, and maybe Acacius could have died a little bit later, and then it could have been more like better drawn and more cohesive. Because that's the thing that it feels like it's multiple movies kind of contending for the limelight throughout its runtime, and it's just really it's really a big letdown. But with with Fred Hetchinger, which, by the way, okay, Fred Hetchinger, I didn't talk about him and Joseph Quinn in this movie in non-spoilers. I think that they, with what they're given, they give very good performances, as wiry and weird and as over the top as they are. Like, they give very solid performances, and I was so surprised. Fred Hetchinger, this is a guy who I have seen in multiple things over the last several years, but I've never really, I think it's been mostly like not very like heavily featured parts, but like I talked about his role in the movie Thelma with June Squibb on Patreon. And like, this is, I had seen that movie. I watched Thelma a few days after seeing Gladiator II, and I was surprised to see him in the movie in Thelma and Gladiator II. And the two performances are night and day, completely different performances. He's phenomenal in both movies. He's really great in Thelma, and in this movie, he is so off the wall insane. Like, he is legitimately like an insane person, and he plays it so well, and so he plays it really well. And I really kind of liked the change up where it felt like Denzel Washington's character was trying to get Gaeta to kill Fred Hetchinger's character, Caracalla, but it turns out to be kind of different. He swaps it out so that the more insane one can ascend to the throne, so that he can further sow discord and sow like issues within the Roman Empire, and bring about the fall of it. Which also, here's the thing as well, his arc, Denzel Washington's arc, again, it is contending with so many different points in the movie, so many different choices and different character dynamics. So like when it's revealed, like when he shows Connie Nielsen like the mark of Marcus Aurelius on him, and it's revealed that he was a slave under Marcus Aurelius, and that his whole arc, his whole idea throughout this movie is to basically bring down the fall of the Roman Empire because of what Marcus Aurelius did to him and his people. Yeah, like that, it's cool. It comes about so suddenly, and it's not because the movie is so overstuffed, it doesn't have that emotional impact that it should. Same with him firing the arrow and killing Connie Nielsen's character in like the final showdown in the Colosseum. Like it just comes across as just something that feels like, and it's a problem with some legacy sequels like this, but it just feels like, okay, this is the next extension of what we should do. Like, this is what we should do. Let's just do this, and hopefully the audience will have some kind of emotional reaction to it, because Lucius sure as fuck doesn't. Like, it just seems like there's the echo of that with her being shot in the chest the same way his wife was. Like, there is, on screen, we see that we see that connection that he forges with that, because we have the benefit of like a flashback scene, and because Ridley Scott's like, hey, we should make sure that the audience knows that this is an interesting kind of callback. But with that, like, it just doesn't land, because it doesn't feel like it has the emotional heft that it should. And that's throughout the entire movie. All of these big moments, like Fred Hetchinger's character killing Joseph Quinn, with Lucius's wife dying, with the reveal of Denzel Washington's character's backstory. Like, all of these have like big narrative beats to them, but they don't feel as important to the plot, because they are kind of the sum of way too many things happening to really to have one or the other be a big focus of it. So that was a problem for me. And then we get kind of the ending, the kind of big showdown between Denzel Washington and Paul Mescal's character, with Lucius and Macrinus. And like, it's good. It's fine. I think that because Denzel Washington's character is kind of revealed to be the big bad of the movie, I guess, or like a big puppet master of it, the urge to bring him to justice, because he is revealed so late in the movie, or like his intentions are revealed so late in the movie, it feels a little hollow. It feels a little bit hollow, like everything else in the movie. And then when you get that final showdown where like they're fighting and they're fighting in the kind of riverbed, I think, or creek bed. And then you finally get, his, like, Denzel Washington's comeuppance. Like, it's really cool, because the violence is really cool. Like, he chops off his arm and kills him. Like, it's cool. It's neat, but it doesn't have that emotional narrative punch that it deserves to have. And then you follow that up with Lucius kind of giving this impassioned speech to kind of bring about the like unification of Rome and Marcus Aurelius's vision of Rome. Like, it's all well and good, but then I don't know, it just kind of seems a little bit like a little bit empty, a little bit not very deep, honestly. Not very deep. Yeah, and some friends of mine were complaining a little bit about the ending, the kind of last scene with Lucius in the Colosseum, and he's kind of speaking into the ether, basically saying like, please, Father, guide me, or whatever. How do I do this? And you see just visions of Maximus with his hand on the wheat field or whatever, echoing from the first movie. And then it kind of cuts to black, and that's basically the end. But it just feels like that's like an afterthought of a scene. But some friends of mine were complaining because like it looks horrendous. It looks like weird green screen, like CGI animated, like backdrop cinematography. It looks like glowing, like weird colors and whatnot. And in a weird way, I am a little bit okay with that. I liked that kind of ethereal sort of presentation of that, because I don't know if it's necessarily supposed to be like a dream sequence, or it's supposed to be something that is maybe not entirely reality for him. But also there's nothing to really say otherwise. There's nothing really to tell us otherwise that it is a dream sequence, or that it is real or not real, or that maybe he's drifting off into the afterlife like his father. I don't know. It just seems like a little bit not finished, really. And that's kind of the kind of a bad point to end the movie on. But I didn't mind the kind of ethereal, weird visualization of it as much as some others did. So I feel like there's probably other things that I could say about this movie, but I'm blanking on them. So, that should just about do it for my review of Gladiator 2. Let me know what you thought of the movie. Once again, I rated it 3.5 stars out of 5. I will probably be dropping that to 3 stars. I'm going to commit to that. I'm going to drop this movie down to 3 stars. I'm still going to retain the heart. So I did like the movie, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original movie by any stretch. No, nor should it, nor was it ever going to, because that first movie is fantastic, and I don't think that there's any way to kind of recreate that magic. Even though the movie does follow some of the similar beats of the movie, which, by the way, that's another thing about the movie that I was kind of like a little not confused about, but I was just kind of like anticipating a little bit more. Like, we have Lucius going through the motions of like realizing like, oh, he like being told like, oh, he is actually Maximus's son, and he is going to like, oh, strength and honor, and he's gonna like rise up, and he's gonna bring about like he's going to finish what his father couldn't, and he's going to bring about like a rule of law from like Marcus Aurelius's vision and make things right. And like, yeah, that's all well and good and everything, but there's a scene, there are a couple of scenes where he is giving speeches to kind of rouse up the troops, like the gladiators. He's like, we're sending people, like people are coming, we're going to overthrow Rome, we're going to do this and that and all of that. And like the way that it's done and the way that the movie is written, like those scenes, that, and then also at the end when he gives his big speech to the two opposing forces, this is a minor thing, but I really thought that he was going to say the line, what we do in life echoes in eternity. I thought that that's where it was leading toward both times. Like when he is talking to the gladiators and like trying to bring them, like kind of pep them up. There's a word, like hype them up. I was like, oh, he's going to say it. He's going to say it. And it's going to be cool because it's like, you know, he's carrying on his father's legacy. It's going to be that. And then he doesn't say it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then when he's giving that speech at the end, I was like, oh, that's going to be interesting because he's going to say it. And it's going to be kind of a different context because instead of being like what we do in life echoes in eternity, so make it count like in terms of going into battle, he's going to say it and it's going to have a different meaning, saying that like we have an opportunity to institute a rule of law that is not barbaric and driven by violence and vengeance and hate and everything. We have it in us to be better. So what we do in life echoes in eternity, but he doesn't say it. And like, that would have been a really cool, like callback. That would have been a really cool, like piece of writing, but unfortunately it's not there. And it just like, it's a minor thing. It's a very minor complaint on my part, but it didn't work for me. Yeah. So, that will do it for this, featured review of Gladiator II. Once again, rating it 3 stars. And yeah, let me know what you thought of Gladiator II. If you loved it, if you hated it, whatever, you know how to reach me. You can email me or, message me on social media. So that'll do it for the featured review, and, stay tuned for the secondary review. All right, and before we get to our secondary review, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that if you like the show, please take a moment to follow us on social media and subscribe to and rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or whatever your preferred podcast app is. And don't forget to subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer Podcast YouTube channel as well, where I post video versions of reviews and some different content over there. And also occasionally like live streams of podcasts. Again, that's at YouTube on the username Obsessive Viewer Podcast, link in the show notes. And if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, you can go to Libsyn and use the promo code OBSESS. When you sign up for a new account, you'll get up to 2 months free depending on when you sign up, and we'll get a commission on it as well. So more details on that are in the show notes of this episode. And now back to the show.
You tell me I view obsessively.
You were gone forever.
It was 3 days.
Where are we going?
Before Maui stole Tifiti's heart, our ancestors wanted to connect our island to all the people of the entire ocean. It's my job as a wayfinder to finish what they started.
Moana, show our people just how far we'll go.
All right, and for this week's secondary review, I'm going to share my thoughts on Moana 2, which is in theaters. It Premiered in theaters November 26th or 27th. And yeah, I'm going to do a non-spoiler review for this movie. So yeah, that's all I've got to say on that. The premise, according to IMDb, is after receiving an unexpected call from her wayfinding ancestors, Moana must journey to the far seas of Oceania, and into dangerous, long-lost waters for an adventure unlike anything she's ever faced. Directors for this movie were David G. Derrick Jr., Jason Hand, Dana Ledoux Miller. Writers were Jared Bush and Dana Ledoux Miller, with story by credit for Jared Bush and Dana Ledoux Miller, and Beck Smith. And the cast includes Alui Cravalho as Moana, Dwayne Johnson, Hualalai Chung, Rose Matafio, David Fain, Awimai Fraser. I'm so sorry. I'm trying really hard not to mispronounce these names. Khaleesi Lambert, Suda, Tamura Morrison, and Nicole Scherzinger. And it is in theaters, but famously or infamously, it was originally going to be a Disney Plus original series. And they decided in February of this year to scrap the series and just release it as a feature film. And I say that because I know that a lot of people are going to be, or probably have already, talked about that and talked about how that is what this movie is. It feels like, and it does feel like that. It does feel like it's scrapped from a Disney Plus original series, and I mean that in a derogatory sense, as everyone else does. It feels very much undercooked and underserved in terms of whatever plot they were trying to do in the Disney Plus series. Honestly, this movie feels like, as far as plot is concerned, and as far as story is concerned, it feels like the movie, as it is, like the overall movie, it feels like it is basically a story of like, oh, we can flesh this out in the latter part of the series. So there's not a lot of development. There's not a lot of like building up of the storylines or supporting characters in what ended up being this feature film. And that is very much to the movie's detriment. It's very much something that feels just like a huge misstep, but I won't go so far as to say that makes this movie bad. I ended up rating it 3 stars, which is pretty positive, honestly. 3 out of 5 stars. And it's not bad. It's a fun movie to take your kids to, I'm sure. But, for me as an adult, it just felt very much underserved, and it felt very much like it was something that was repurposed from a Disney Plus original series. But it doesn't feel like it's repurposed from a dumpster fire of a Disney Plus original series. Like, I'm very confused and curious what went into the decision making to make this a feature film, because on one hand, it does not feel like it is something that it doesn't feel like it's something that they were working on the show and we're like, oh my God, we've got a brilliant movie here. We can just release this as a movie and it'll be profitable for Disney, because it'll be huge, because it's a great movie, and it would be terrible to have it toiling away on Disney Plus with all the other streaming stuff. But on the other hand, it doesn't feel like it's like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. Let's just repackage this and put it in theaters and hope people see it on name alone. It seems in between those two things, those two types of stories. And I don't know where it comes down on. I don't know what went into the decision-making process of making it a movie rather than a TV show. So, having said that, I'm going to try not to really talk about that aspect of it because I'm uninformed. But as far as the actual finished product of the film is, like I said, there are a lot of very just underserved character arcs. There's a whole villain character that I think is a villain, that they present one way, midway through the movie, and then that plotline is abandoned because presumably that is a plotline that would have been resolved later in the Disney Plus series. But because it's a movie, that is abandoned. Like, that character does not come back until like a mid-credit scene that feels very much like a latched on addition to the movie. And it just doesn't work. It's not compelling at all. And that's the other thing that's a big problem for me with this movie, is that the big arc of the movie doesn't feel like there's much scale to it. Like, the entire plot revolves around Moana following this ancestral like rocket or oh god, this vision in the sky to let her like reach her and her crew to an island that would connect all the other islands, to connect other like civilizations and create a network and find others. And it doesn't feel like it's that big of a scale. In fact, when we get to the resolution of the movie, it feels like, oh, this is the resolution of half a season of TV. And the rest of the season would have been interacting with people or finding something else in out at sea. I said I wasn't going to say that anymore. I said I wasn't going to talk about it being a Disney Plus series anymore, and I'm going to try to curb that. But that's important here because the plotting of this movie just feels very haphazard and very episodic. And that's a problem because there's so much time spent, like in one area, there's this big creature in the middle of the sea, and they have to, it's like a situation where like, oh, there's enemies here, but we need to band together to escape this and blah, blah, blah. And it feels just so undercooked because that feels like it's like that episode of the show. Again, I said I wasn't going to do that, but I have to. Like, it necessitates it. Like, it needs that kind of thing because the story isn't depicted that well, or isn't done in such a way that would lead you to not talk about it as an episodic television show. The other big thing about it that is surely going to be the talk of the town, and probably already is since it came out like earlier this week, the music in this movie is not done by Lin-Manuel Miranda, which I neglected to mention. I saw the original movie in 2016. I loved it. I think I did. I don't know if I reviewed it. I think I did review it on the podcast proper, because I remember, this is so cringy of me, but like I remember saying, like, wanting to say Polynesian culture, but I think I referred to it as Polyponesian, and it's bad. It was bad. It was in a potpourri section in episode 196. So way, way, way back in 2016. Yeah, it was bad. So I think that's where it was. But anyway, it might have been in the year in review episode. But either way, I cringe at that thought, but I hadn't revisited this movie since 2016. I hadn't revisited the original movie since 2016. I had listened to the soundtrack here and there throughout the years, but I hadn't revisited the movie. And before the screening, I hurriedly read the Wikipedia page for the original movie. So I was up to date. I was up to speed. But what I noticed initially and throughout the entire movie is that the music is okay. The music is decent. I don't know who did the music for this sequel, but it's not Lin-Manuel Miranda. Whatever you want to think or say about Lin-Manuel Miranda, his like whole persona, I know some people are kind of played out of him or annoyed with him or what have you, but like Hamilton is amazing, and like his work in a lot of things elevates it in a big way. And one of those things is Moana. Like, I remember the music standing out so much and being like the most memorable part of the original Moana. So without Lin-Manuel Miranda doing the music for Moana 2, you get a lot of just serviceable Disney like musical numbers that just don't work. Like, it's not that they don't work, it's just they don't leave an impression. Like, they really do not leave an impression. I thought that Maui's song, he has one song kind of midway through the movie that I thought was fine. I thought it was probably the standout of the music of it. Like, throughout the entire movie, I was thinking like, yeah, the music's okay. I know Lin-Manuel Miranda didn't do it, so it's not going to be as memorable, but the music is fine. But it wasn't until the end of the movie, and this is hopefully not a spoiler, but at the end of the movie, they replay the track from the original movie, We Know the Way. And that was probably the first time in several years that I'd heard music from the original Moana. Like, I've heard it here and there over the years, but that was the first time like I heard a track in several years from the original Moana. And to hear that at the end of this movie, it recontextualized how I felt about the music in Moana 2, because it reminded me how great the music was in the first movie. And by extension, it shined a light on how mediocre the music was in this movie, in Moana 2. So even though I was kind of enjoying the music here and there throughout the movie at a serviceable level, like once I was reminded of how great the original movie's music was, it kind of really colored my vision, I guess, or colored my opinion of the sequel in a negative way. Again, about the scale of the movie, it's not up to snuff. It's like it feels like like three episodes of a TV show strung together. But that's not to say it doesn't look good. Like, the animation looks fantastic. It looks great. There's some really cool weather effects on their quest to get to their destination late in the movie. There's some really cool, interesting things about that. But also, a lot of the plot is revolving around I don't know, a demon, a demigod. I'm not sure. Like, someone that's in opposition of Maui. It's very cluttered, it's very muddy, and it doesn't really connect really at all, because like the finale of the movie, the climax of the movie doesn't have like a villain at the center of it. It doesn't have like an antagonist for them to go up against directly. It's just them doing these actions that are admittedly pretty thrilling in a kids movie kind of sheen. But it's also just like there's no presence there. There's nothing that is really making it feel like, oh, this is the buildup that we've been building toward. This is the climax that we've been building toward this whole movie, and now we're going to have a final showdown. There's none of that. It's just like, we need to do this thing. We need to go from point A to point B, and in doing so, we need to do action C in order to reach, conclusion D. So it just feels very flat. And because of that, and because that is such a big portion of bringing the movie to that climactic conclusion, because that's such a huge part of it, the scale doesn't match. Like, it does not feel like there's anything that they're doing that would be earth-shattering or world-shattering to their world. And that's the distinction I need to make there, is that I don't need it to be like large world-destroying stakes in a movie, but I need it to be huge enough stakes for the character's world, like the character's like existence. I need a movie to sell to me that if they fail at this, their world is going to end. Their personal world, like Moana's like personal like existence, is going to be threatened in some capacity. And I never really got that impression. Like, there is peril. There are things that happen that puts these characters in peril and in danger in varying degrees, but it also just doesn't feel like it's a feature film. It doesn't feel like it's something that is even like a natural extension of the first movie. It just feels like this is an adventure that these characters go on, and once they complete it, we're, end credits. We're playing music from the original movie and reminded how great that movie was. And because of that, it just really fell flat for me. The voice acting is really solid. The motion capture is pretty solid. It just felt very hollow, very empty, and very not as emotionally gripping as it could be. Kind of similar to Gladiator II. I didn't feel like the stakes of the characters, or I didn't feel like the emotions of the characters were really coming through in a meaningful way as the movie was kind of going through its paces and reaching the different points of the plot that is necessitated by a script for a TV show, basically. So I don't think I really have much else to say about Moana 2. It's in theaters now. It's gonna be on streaming, I'm sure, on Disney Plus. I ended up rating it 3 stars. Might drop that down to 2.5. I'll probably keep it at 3 stars because I did find it entertaining. At least it was at least entertaining. I don't know if I would have been more entertained if it was a Disney Plus show. To be honest, I probably wouldn't have watched it if it was a Disney Plus show, just because Disney Plus is, like I was telling Evan at the screening. I was telling my friend Evan at the screening that Disney Plus for me is a repository for Simpsons reruns for me to watch while I'm falling asleep in my recliner. Like, I don't watch Disney Plus. That's one of the streaming services that I don't really regularly load up or browse or anything. I usually go Hulu, or sometimes if I'm feeling frisky, a little bit of Netflix, even though Netflix on my Roku is a little janky. Like, it will, I don't know, it's a whole thing. Like, if I press play on Netflix on my Roku, it's like, okay, maybe this will play, maybe it'll freeze up and I'll have to restart my Roku. But anyway, that's a whole tangent. But yeah, I also don't think the more I get exposure to Dwayne Johnson as an actor, whether it be motion capture or voice acting or big budget for some freaking reason, Christmas movie with Chris Evans, kind of action stuff like Red One, the more I get exposed to Dwayne Johnson as an actor, the more I'm convinced this man has no chemistry, has no charisma. Like, he is, like, even off camera, like he is kind of a, not grifter, but he's kind of just a marketing tool, basically. Yeah, I will have said, I've already said my piece about some stuff, but basically he's kind of a tool. Like, he doesn't have much charisma, and he doesn't have much on-screen charisma, even in an animated movie. And that's kind of just, I don't see his appeal, honestly. Like, I just don't see his appeal. So as Maui, I do think that there is a little bit of charisma there, a little bit of fun that he's having with the role, but I'm kind of constantly reminded that, yeah, that's Dwayne Johnson. He's kind of just he's just kind of a big dumb guy. Like, he isn't that good. So I don't know. So those are my thoughts on Moana 2. It is in theaters, like I said. It will be streaming on Disney Plus soon enough, I'm sure. But if you have seen it, let me know what you thought. And if not, let me know if my review has tempted you to watch it or not. I certainly kind of hope not. So that's my review of Moana 2. It's in theaters now. And that'll do it for this review, for the secondary review of episode 454 of the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Okay, and now to kind of wind down, I'm going to do a quick potpourri section. I have a couple of movies that I want to talk about that I've watched recently. And I'm just going to kind of wind down and talk about them. So if this is your first time listening, Potpourri is a section of the podcast where we talk about whatever we want, stuff we're looking forward to, things we've watched lately, things that we want, whatever we want, as long as it smells good. And I am going to talk about 2 movies, one of which I'm going to talk more about later, in the form of an essay, but a couple of movies that I watched that aren't part of my award season FYC screening. So first of all, before all of that, I do want to mention that Tiny has begun watching Succession. So I'm going to be asking him for updates on that because I'm very excited for him to watch Succession. So I'm excited for that. Just wanted to keep you guys abreast, keep you guys up to date on that. So yeah, he has started watching Succession. He's only watched the first episode, but I will keep you guys posted. So for Potpourri, my first piece of Potpourri that I'm going to have for this week's episode of the Obsessive Viewer podcast is for the Tony Scott 2006 Denzel Washington detective thriller time travel movie, Deja Vu. So I watched this for an upcoming essay that I'm going to be writing for Midwest Film Journal that'll come out next month. And yeah, so Deja Vu. This movie is fantastic, and it's better than I think it has any real right to be. It's very much in Tony Scott's wheelhouse. He very much has that kind of quick cut, stylish sort of action movie veneer to him. Like, it's very stylized in terms of like having, I don't know how exactly to describe it, but kind of sort of slow motion. But I think it's more that like the background is in slow motion and what's in focus is fast moving. It's very unique and of like a Tony Scott aesthetic. So if you don't know, Deja Vu, it came out in 2006. The plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is after a ferry is bombed in New Orleans, an ATF agent joins a unique investigation using experimental surveillance technology to find the bomber, but soon finds himself becoming obsessed with one of the victims. The movie, of course, stars Denzel Washington, Jim Caviezel, Val Kilmer, Adam Goldberg, and Eldon Hansen, and Erica Alexander, and Bruce Greenwood. Directed by Tony Scott, and written by Bill Marcelli and Terry Rossio. So Deja Vu, I said, like I said before, I am going to be writing something for Midwest Film Journal more about this, but to collect my thoughts and document my thoughts here. I have seen this movie now a few times. I saw it once in, I think, 2007, and I saw it again in 2011. I was surprised by that, but I saw it in 2011, and now I've seen it in 2024. This holds up really, really well, and it wasn't until I read in the Letterboxd reviews after I watched it, my friend and colleague Nick Rogers, who's been on the podcast before, he had written on Letterboxd that he saw it fairly recently, and he said that the high-speed chase in this movie does what Christopher Nolan would go on to attempt in Tenet a lot better than what Christopher Nolan achieved in Tenet. So in Tenet, there's this big action set piece of this car chase where I think John David Washington is, which is funny, like it's a funny connection there, because of Denzel Washington. So where John David Washington is as the protagonist. Jesus Christ, I don't like Tenet, but anyway, where he is chasing someone who's going in reverse time or something, and it's a big freeway chase. It's a big budget thing. It's effective. It's interesting, but I think that the concept of Tenet was a little too convoluted, and I only saw it when I was down really, really in the dumps with COVID, like really bad COVID symptoms, so I wasn't in the right frame of mind for it. But anyway, in Deja Vu, the conceit of the movie is that the investigators can look 4 days and X number of hours in the past. And it's two concurrent timelines. So as they are existing in the present, that clock is running in the past 4 days. So they're running concurrently. It's an Einstein-Rosenberg bridge wormhole thing that's been depicted in countless sci-fi movies and shown in countless sci-fi movies. Actually, like if you're watching the video version of this, if I ever post it, it's basically like a sheet of paper folded in half, and 2 points on each point of the paper can be pushed, can create a bridge to different points in time. So the high-speed chase has Denzel Washington driving this Hummer through the highways of New Orleans, and while having like this really rudimentary headset like VR rig that shows 4 days in the past. So they're chasing someone 4 days in the past where it's nighttime, it's rainy, whereas in the present timeline, it's bright and sunny, and it's just so cool. It's so freaking cool. It's so effective. It's so straightforward and so much of a thrilling sequence that's done incredibly well. The movie works and doesn't work in certain parts. The whole time travel conceit is very effective by my taste. I am a time travel connoisseur. I love time travel in movies and fiction, and this brand of time travel is very effective because it's married to this detective thriller in a very just straightforward way. And that's the big thing that I really took away from this viewing of this movie, is that it's so effective as this like detective thriller with a sci-fi bend, and it's effective because Denzel Washington is a freaking movie star. His affability, his amiability in this movie, like his just effortless charisma when his character is just talking to people, just like he has this effortless just charisma. Like it's not even to the point where he's hamming it up at any point. It's just this incredibly effective, just likability. Like when he's just saying like these throwaway lines that actually come into focus at the end of the movie, but like things like, oh yeah, you know, did you take a message for the person that called? And like he's like, oh, you didn't have anything else? This is a candy wrapper. Like, oh, you're cutting back. I see. Like just very just effortlessly fun when he's having like a conversation with the detectives, where like in an ordinary kind of detective movie or thriller, like he's an ATF agent. In a normal movie like this, that's not like contingent on the affability of the lead actor and charisma of the lead actor, they would be fighting for jurisdiction. They would be fighting for everything. But it's so disarming to see Denzel Washington just being like, all right, well, I just have one question. Where's the coffee? Like, because this is a crime scene. There's got to be coffee. Where's the coffee? And it's just like, it's so effortlessly delivered that he's so affable. He's so charismatic. So the time travel aspects of it come into play really well. When we reach the end of the movie, it does kind of fall into some not tropey things, but it just kind of feels like, okay, this is the ending we were always going to go toward. But it's pretty satisfying because it's playing with time in a pretty unique way. Because we've seen a lot of these things. It's the conceit of the movie. It's deja vu. Like we've seen all of the pieces as they've been occurring leading up to this moment, as if it's been an investigation that we're a part of. We're seeing the little pieces here and there as Denzel Washington is watching in the past through the surveillance unit thing, and those pieces are coming together, like as he's also piecing them together in the present, like investigating things, seeing like, oh, this looks like this thing must have occurred and it hasn't occurred yet. So it's a lot of really interesting detective stuff that's kind of through this sheen of sci-fi time travel stuff that really feels just really well done. Really, really well done. So that's Deja Vu. It's not streaming anywhere. But if you have a mind, like rent it somewhere. It's really cool. That's Deja Vu. More to come on Midwest Film Journal when I write an essay about that. The next piece of potpourri that I have is, again, it's not streaming anywhere. I've been wanting to see this movie again for years. It's from 2007. It's David Wayne's The 10. And if you don't know David Wayne, he directed Wet Hot American Summer, They Came Together, Role Models. He's done a lot of stuff. But those three, at least the first two, are cornerstone comedies for me. Wet Hot American Summer and They Came Together. They Came Together is one of the most rewatched movies on my Letterboxd, and I watch that movie one or two times a year, if not more so. That is like the ultimate comfort comedy because it is so much in keeping of or in service of this wacky, quirky, just offbeat humor that plays so incredibly well to my comedic sensibilities and my comedic fandoms, because it is just so goofy. So They Came Together came out in 2014, and Wet Hot American Summer came out in, I think, 99 or 2000. I think it was 2000 or maybe 2001. Between those two movies, and somewhere along the way he directed Role Models, but somewhere In between those two movies in 2007 was the movie The 10, which is, I should probably bring that up on IMDb, but The 10 came out in 2007. It's really not available anywhere, like at all. To be honest, I kind of had to pirate this movie. So The 10, 2007, the plot summary courtesy of IMDb is 10 stories, each inspired by one of the 10 commandments. The cast includes Paul Rudd, Jessica Alba, Winona Ryder, Adam Brody, John Hamm, Ken Marino. Who else is in this? A ton of people. Liev Schreiber pops up. A bunch of people are in this movie, and it's directed by David Wayne, written by Ken Marino and David Wayne. It is like short films, kind of sketch comedy short film parodies of the 10 Commandments. Each one is depicted, and it's framed by this story of Paul Rudd's character kind of narrating his life struggles in kind of like a weird one-man show kind of format, where it's like he's on a set, and in the background there are these huge slabs with the 10 Commandments, and each break between those short films, like he's talking about his marital problems, and it's kind of the framing story goes through his marital problems from beginning to end, in kind of a weird like offshoot of honestly, so it's kind of an offshoot of like a Woody Allen romantic comedy, which is interesting because now that I'm saying that out loud, it feels like it's kind of a little bit of a precursor toward They Came Together, because They Came Together is an incredible satire of romantic comedies, and there's a lot of elements to it. In fact, there's a piece of music in the 10 that was used in They Came Together. That like it was originally, I didn't realize that it was presumably originally written for the 10, because the same person did the score for both movies. It's this song, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it's the music that plays when in They Came Together when they're banging, when they're having sex. I think it's, I don't know. Oh, Forgive Me Love, by Craig Wedren. But anyway, The 10, I saw it when I was a security guard, in like my early 20s, when Tiny and I were security guards. I remember what we would do is we would work nights. We would work midnight to 8, and we would bring our laptops. We would bring a bunch of movies, and we would just like pick one to watch overnight while we were working as security guards. It's okay to say that out loud because the security company that we worked for does not exist anymore. So anyway, I vaguely remember The 10 being one of those movies, or maybe it was one of the movies that I watched on my own. But regardless, I remember liking it quite a bit, thinking it was very funny, thinking it was very sharp. There are some interesting, short films, part of it, the sketches, I guess you would call them, but there are some interesting sketches in the movie, like Ken Marino does, like thou shalt not murder, and he plays a surgeon who basically keeps, like as he's sewing up a patient, he leaves a pair of scissors in her abdomen, and she comes back into the hospital with horrible pain. Jason Sudeikis is in it. He plays her husband. And Ken Marino is just like, oh yeah, I left the scissors in there as a goof. I was goofing. And like the movie just, or like this vignette of the story, this storyline just goes through the motions of him just saying like, it was a goof, like pranking people in horrible ways. And I remember that being the one that stood out the most in my memory, and it's fine. It's okay. Like a lot of the comedy in this movie doesn't land, and that's kind of a shame to say because I really wanted it to, because I had been waiting to revisit this movie for a long time, and in the interim having They Came Together be one of my like all-time favorite comedies. It might even be, I think it might actually be in my top 50. I'm sure it is in my top 50 favorite movies of all time. It's a 5-star movie for me. So having it, like with that in mind, I was hoping to like The 10 a lot more, but it's a mixed bag, as most like anthology sketch movies like this are. Some standouts of it are Liev Schreiber and Jolo Truglio being competitive neighbors for the thou shalt not covet a neighbor's goods or something, and it's ridiculous. It's over the top because what they're coveting is like one of the neighbors gets orders a CAT scan machine, and the other neighbor gets jealous and orders a CAT scan machine. The first neighbor sees that they order a CAT scan machine, so they have to order a second one. So they have dozens of CAT scan machines. They keep ordering back and forth and everything, and it all escalates and blows up. It's great. But it's wacky and weird. So it's kind of hard to gauge. And there are some other short films in this that kind of, I don't know, there's one, I think it's maybe not God's Name in Vain or Put No Other God Before, whatever one of the 10 Commandments are, but there's one with Gretchen Mol, who I'd forgotten was in this movie. She's fantastic. She plays like kind of a reserved, quiet, like shy librarian who goes to, I think, Spain on a trip and falls in love with someone who ends up being Jesus Christ, like literally Jesus. And that kind of goes into some crazy, wacky comedy bits. So there's some really interesting things here, but some of them don't really work all that well. But they're pretty fun. Like whatever one of the commandments are that's about honoring and respecting the Sabbath, that's like the last one of the movie. It has a guy skipping church and just standing or like having a naked like party in his house as he's skipping church, and it escalates from there as he's telling more people about it, and there's just like naked men in his house like partying in a non-sexual way while they're all skipping church. So I don't know. So that's kind of the vibe of the movie. It was not as good as I remembered it, but it's still very solid as a comedy. It's incredibly hard not to like. It's incredibly, I don't know where I was going with that. It's serviceable, and it is not a movie. It's not a comedy to judge against or use as a yardstick against, or judge against the yardstick of Wet Hot American Summer or They Came Together, because that's a fool's errand, because it's nowhere near as good as those two comedies. And I think part of that is because it is that kind of anthology format with different like short vignettes kind of collected together. And also the framing story didn't really work all that well for me because I've seen it done so much better 7 years later from They Came Together with the same actor. Paul Rudd is in They Came Together. And he did like, it's just a better movie than the framing device of the 10 is. So those are my roundabout thoughts on the 10. I think I ended up rating it 3 stars. I'd be surprised if I rated it 3.5. Maybe I did rate it 3.5 because I think it, I did rate it 3.5. So, I don't know. I think mostly that just that brand of humor really works on me, even if I didn't really vibe with the overall movie. But yeah, I don't know. It was okay. If you have the means to procure it or, what have you, I don't think it's even available. Like, I think the DVD is like out of print. So it's hard to find. It's hard to find. Like I said, I had to go through other means to find it. But if you have those means, I recommend checking it out. If you're a fan of Wet Hot American Summer or They Came Together or even Role Models or any other David Wayne movie or production, I recommend checking it out. It wouldn't hurt. So yeah. But anyway, that's the 10. And that will do it for this episode of the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Let me bring up my notes here. So that's it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. As always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Also, check out Obsessive Viewer Podcast's other podcasts. other shows, Tower Junkies, a Stephen King podcast hosted by Tiny and myself, and Anthology, the Twilight Zone and classic sci-fi podcast hosted by me. Next week on the show, I think I might try to cobble together a bonus episode for FYC Potpourri is what I'm going to call it. But if I don't do that, I might not get that. But either way, next week, I'm hoping to also do a full-length episode of Wicked and The Order. So that'll be next week. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. And now, enjoy this short clip from a recent Patreon-exclusive episode. For the full episode and more Patreon-exclusive content, sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. When Danny and Thelma are on screen together, when Fred Hetchinger and June Squibb are sharing a scene, it is unbelievably joyous. It is a joyful, just wholesome, wonderful depiction of a grandson and grandmother. Like, it is just like this overbearing level or overwhelming level of just love and kinship between these two characters. And it is so charming. It is so incredibly charming because they love each other. They care for one another, and he genuinely cares about his grandmother. And that's something that I really responded to and loved in this movie, is because he's not like this. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our episodes, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on this show, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, visit obsessiveviewer.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and grow our community. If you want to support the show and get early access to new episodes, as well as a steady stream of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. For information on more podcasts presented by obsessiveviewer.com, visit obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Check out the show notes for your promo code to get started podcasting today.
O'Reilly.
You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.